new program. I will do a quick welcome to country as well, if I can find my correct screen. Sorry, guys. All right, sorry, it's an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Inside the Outhouse acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. All right, guys. So everybody knows who Lori Modde is. She's from Outdoors New South Wales ACT. And I will just pass it on over to you, Lori.
Thanks, Sherry. No, I'm really pleased that you've allowed me to come on to Inside the Outhouse today. Literally, the whole idea behind this program has been a conversation on my board for a little while, and it's been. So let me just articulate. Largely our concerns, or what we're trying to address, is the knowledge and use of the AAAS and the good practice guides that currently exist for our sector. It's also trying to encourage the industry to continue to grow their knowledge and expertise. Epidemic, they have the tools and the ability to be able to continue their operation and be sustainable through the challenges that they face. The third one is really around building awareness of the sector, because what we're trying to do is be able to encourage participation, keep our employees, encourage more employees to join our sector. So trying to get the awareness about the outdoors seems to be one challenge that we do have before us. The fourth one is around needing to understand the career pathways. And that's not only just for people entering the sector and saying, okay, what can I do? Where can I go with this? But also keeping people, which has been a topic of Inside the Outhouse a couple of times that I've been on. And then the fifth one is around insurance challenges. And as we came out of COVID, certainly that is probably even more so as people struggle with getting insurance for their activities and making sure they're talking with their insurers and providing the things that they need, that they're satisfied with. So this program had all of that in mind. And look, I'm not saying this is the golden chalice. I'm not saying that this is something we're going to turn around and implement tomorrow. But what it has done is start a conversation, which was more empowering the industry to come to us and say, yes, that could work. No, that can't. Let's think about da-da-da. And New South Wales and ACT wanted to start that conversation and potentially trial something, so that with OCA, obviously Dom's here today, hoping that then whatever works or whatever doesn't work, we learn from that when we take it potentially to a federal level. So all of the case that we're proposing has the industry at mind. So we're trying to make sure we've got the tools and the ability to make it a sustainable industry. So let me just quickly take you to the page, which is set up with the content. So if you're seeing this for the first time, you probably haven't had a chance to read this, but I can send you the link through the chat. That way you can probably monitor on your screen as well. Ooh. Oh, thanks, Sherry. I won't do. This is the proposed program. So again, looking at those four areas there, and the fifth one that I've already mentioned is around that career pathway, which we haven't actually put into the website. But this is open for consultation and communication with the sector for the next 13 days. And it talks around accreditation versus certification versus licensing, which are very different things. And the reason why the board looked at certification is that it is voluntary, but it might be a prerequisite in time to come as it builds. So it could be something that provides good marketability or good steps for people to gain. And the program is designed at the leader level. However, we have asked in the feedback portal, should this be at organisational level or the individual level? So that is a consideration that we're certainly asking the industry to look at. The proposed structure involves various different criteria, and going back to those 5 things that I mentioned, trying to cover off some of that, which is around knowledge of the AAA. It could be a submission of experience and qualifications. It could be anything that the sector sees as value to be able to provide that level of certification. The program that we have here is designed at 5 different levels. And there's some beautiful creative, which you can certainly have your say on, whether you prefer the first option, the second option, or the third option, to keep those ones that are very creatively minded in touch with what we're proposing. But then it goes through the different levels. And as it says, it's purely in draft. This is not something we're turning around and implementing tomorrow, but we're just looking at, what are the things that are important to people and what they see are tools that could help this industry grow and develop. And at the end of the day, be sustainable, because that's really the sector. So look, that's what is designed to do. And then the feedback portal is at the bottom here. So if you wanted to give some private feedback, you can do so via this portal here. Alternatively, you could actually do it publicly on this forum, which is the proposed Outdoor Leader Certification Program on Facebook, and this is taking form. So I encourage everyone to just join this and join the conversation, because there's some really interesting comments coming in here, some ideas, some challenges that we're seeing, and we're really listening. I mean, this is a great opportunity for us to just hear what the community of outdoors has to say in this space and what they see are the tools that they would like to use. So it's a really quick overview, but I think today is more about conversation. So if anyone has any questions or comments they want to make, this is the opportunity to let's talk about it. Can you still hear me, Sheree? Yep, good. So has anyone got any questions?
Lori, do you just want to stop sharing the screen for a second?
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
Wonderful. All right. Questions from the group on what Lori just went over?
Lori, what sort of comments have been coming through on the Facebook, the conversations there? I know that you sort of mentioned there's been a few different discussions going there. Has there been general support in there, or a few people, asking different questions, or what sort of the vibe?
Yeah, great comment. So when I look at the survey and the Facebook page, it is really fence sitters. There's 50-50. So 50 are going, what the hell are you thinking? And 50% are going, this is awesome. So it's really interesting. And so what I've done, I've dived in there and going, okay, get you don't like it or get you like it, but why? So I've tried to get the conversation going. So and that's why I encourage everyone to jump on there, because there's a lot of people going, I agree with the sentiment. I'm just not sure whether it should be applicable to a person. So great. Okay. If it's applicable to a company or an organization, what do we need to consider? And then others have gone, no, this is great for a person because, particularly in a world where we have a lot of subcontractors and contractors and that sort of thing, this is great. So it's really interesting to see the differences. There's a lot around the AAAS and certainly definitely emphasising that part. I think generically from what I'm seeing across both the survey and the Facebook is people are aware of it, they're just not adapting or using it to the best of their ability in their organizations, or they're seeing their competitors or their allies in the sector not doing it justice either. I think there was an interesting comment around the hours of service, because we proposed, you know, the 5 levels. Potentially, as you get to the higher level, you've got more hours of service. And the comment was, well, if you're at that level and you've got 20 years experience, you shouldn't be doing hours in the field. So you've got it round the wrong way. So I'm like, okay, interesting point. There was a lot of discussion around the quals, because we said quals and or equivalent. And they said that was the failing, I think, of another program that existed in the past, where there wasn't enough resources to verify those other quals or subsequent quals. Just going through the insurance. Sorry, Dom, go.
Sorry, just going on what you just said, because that was one of my questions, is how or who is going to determine the equivalent quals?
Yeah. Well, that's a process we've got to go through. So what do we see as equivalent quals versus experience on the ground, or yeah, it could be international quals if they're coming from overseas. So yeah, that's a big area of criteria that needs to be looked at if we go down that path.
If we went down that path, we could also, if an operator is employing someone as a white water guide and has, you know, been through their own training system and assessment of the competency of the person, that could be another way. You know, if they're working for an operator, the operator says, yes, yeah, we accept this, and that's then provided with some statement from an operator, for instance, could be a way of doing it. That would probably be easier than trying to have an external person initially. Anyone that's working for an operator or an organisation at the moment that is running activities is supposed to have been assessed to some degree, even if they don't have a formal TAFE or university ticket.
That's virtually a form of peer recognition, just in that world. But yeah, it's a difficult one. It certainly was a difficult one for Knowles as far as trying to get to that point of view when we were running Knowles. It's a really hard thing to manage, and there's so much work involved in it, and then it becomes, well, what's it cost per year to even do that sort of currency check and all those sort of things. So I think that's a real difficulty in that space, but that's not to say it can't be done. And I think it was interesting you mentioned about the discussion about whether it should be pitched at an individual level or an organisation level. I think if one of the goals is we want this scheme to work to help people stay in the outdoor sector, then I think it has to be pitched at individual levels. Otherwise, if it's just about individuals, about organisations delivering quality outcomes, which is another great goal, then it wouldn't actually do anything about retaining those staff. All they'd have to do is have other staff who are in the scheme, or other keep their organisation in the scheme, and they can just churn through whatever staff, which is, I think, one of the weaknesses that our sector's had for quite a while, where the churn on staff has actually been one of our, probably our biggest Achilles heel for a while.
Agreed, Tom. I think we're seeing the results of that now too, where we haven't been able to retain staff, and yeah, as a consequence, you know, there's job adverts everywhere. But to my earlier point, the comments I was getting very early on was, I don't know what career path I'm going to have either. So there's no support for me going into this sector because I don't know where I'm going to end up or where I could end up or aspire to. But yeah, and interesting, as I say, there's 50% of people going, no, we shouldn't be looking at the individual. But I hear you on that. I really see it as a challenge. Sorry, Sheree, go.
Sorry. Yeah, so kind of along the same lines that you were talking about is with the hour system, because when I'm looking at it and I'm looking at where I think I should be, it'd be impossible for me to get the hours because there's not it's been difficult to find work in the outdoor field. And,
Yeah.
so now my number of, hours in the field are significantly lower. And that would just make it really hard. And then do I go down a level, which, would hurt my chances of getting, I guess, more work?
Yeah. And that's an interesting point.
I think that, what Dom was saying, we can look at organisations another day in another situation. I think we've got two options with our leaders. We've got to have somebody that looks after them. Now, either the industry works as a part of their professional development, ensuring they're paid properly, they're looked after, they've got some career potential and the like, or we as leaders, and I'm a leader in the field, we start a union, which is being discussed, and have a union to do that. Now that might be a problematic thing. Or we join a union like the Miscellaneous Workers Union, which is the main union that, or the main award that we're paid under. Personally, I think that if we as peak bodies and organisations can come up with a system, regardless of what it ends up looking like, that looks after our leaders, helping them, get in, get professional development, move through the industry to other jobs somewhere else, but maybe stay for 5 or 10 years, then we're better off to do it than have a union or either a specific union or another union where you could end up with conflict, as you often do. I think we should be the ones that help out, work out with our leaders.
We've got a afternoon, everyone.
Very similar conversation. Hi, Alan.
Hey. We're pretty much in the same boat as you all here, in that we're also trying to figure out how the certification and qualification system works. And there's I won't say opposition from all group parties, but there is opposition from a number of the organizations to get for them to run the system. Whereas we're saying, and a lot of people are saying, that actually the people on the ground, the individual needs to be qualified and the individual needs to run it. And what's happened here in South Africa is the adventure side of tourism has formed its own chapter now. And that's going to look after the organizations. And there's another organization called the National Federation of Tour Guides and Associates, which is going to look after the freelancers and the individual. So those people that are not associated with being in management or owning a company or being strictly academics, they're going to pick up, or trying to pick up the tab and look after the people that are left on the ground and become their voice. And that way it stays out of the unions and it stays out of the centers controlling it. It becomes an independent voice, and then they fight for the accreditation, whether it is going to be certification or a qualification. That's still to be decided.
I think that's an interesting point that Alan's brought up, because there is potential for conflict there as far as trying to manage those sort of things within same organisations. But I think at the moment, that's probably one of the roles of the peak organisations that we can provide to try to bridge some of those gaps. But it's interesting that it's got to the point that, Alan, you've just said, of having two different organisations, almost, one for the employers and one for the employees. The other bit that I think we need to keep in mind in all this is also the accreditation of volunteers as well. So that we're not missing out on a large part of the outdoor sector. And I think whatever accreditation you have, it should take into account hours spent in the field in a volunteer role just as much as in a paid role, because that's a way for someone to actually upskill as well by doing some stuff with, whether it's scouts or guides or one of the other awesome volunteer organisations. You can actually upskill that way as well and obtain qualifications really well in some of those ways. So I think that's probably another thing that we need to think about too.
And with ours, I mean, I'm going kayaking with a friend tomorrow. Yeah, we're going and going to kick out, and we'll be out for 4 hours on a river that we might run commercially, but I should log those hours. They're loggable hours. I'm out on the water, so it wouldn't just be work hours. It could be, volunteer, you might have, and then, just private recreation and training. That's probably the most important thing. I encourage my leaders to go out and train. In fact, I provide equipment so they can go and do their own thing, because that's where they can practice their skills. It's much harder to practice skills when you're working with a group.
It's a really interesting point on the basis of the insurance sector. When I flagged this with some of the providers of insurance, they said that the individuals are a key component to the risk when they assess an organisation. And they see that if, say, for COVID, everyone stopped work, everyone stopped doing activity during lockdown, they saw that as a huge risk because they hadn't continued their activity. So interestingly, their comment on this program was, this is great because we're actually able to look at the employees or the contractors of that organisation and tick a box for them when they're looking at their insurance renewals or applications.
I guess that comes back to the insurers looking at the big picture, not just, does the organisation have a risk management plan? Check. They're actually looking to say, what are they doing to maintain the safety of every person they're interacting with and the environment and the places that they are delivering those activities. And one of those ways, and it's only one way, is some sort of, accreditation scheme, leadership certification, however you want to package it up. It's just another option that can give insurers a little bit more peace of mind potentially, but it also, just because you employ people who have got the gold or platinum level, it still means you've got to have all your other systems in place and have everything else working. So it's that bigger view, I suppose.
I feel like that's a bit short-sighted for insurance companies though, because then doesn't that create the problem that they don't like? By then taking away people's insurance, then they can't hire people to get the experience that they want them to have. So it's kind of like a really bad cycle to get into when you, for them to look at it that way, I think is just.
I think the insurers, brokers are looking at, it would be good to have some sort of professional development system, with our leaders, so that we improve the quality of risk management, personal skills of all our leaders. There's going to be a range, right? And by if we can improve the personal skills by 10%, that's 10% less likely that we're going to have accidents and incidents that are, that someone might be able to sue for instance. So it's only one way to manage the industry, but ultimately, leaders making good decisions in the field, making a good decision on safety because they've got the confidence, that could reduce the number of accidents and incidents, which of course, reduce the risk to insurers and the costs and stuff over a period.
Yeah, as long as it's not the insurers focusing only on the leaders in the field. That's the bit that I think's really important in that. It's still got to be that full systems view of looking at what is causing any incidents, and it's probably changed a bit over time, but there was always that almost the finger of blame pointing towards the poor person in the field every single time about what's the decision making processes there, whereas it needs to go to that broader, what are all the systems involved, which I think has been a part of the Uploads project really well, as far as looking at that sort of view. And as long as the insurance companies get that as well, that they're not just going to go, oh, you didn't have the right level of certification, therefore you must be at fault. That sort of stuff is probably something we need to think about too.
Well, the broker that I consult to, would see 80% on the organisation, and the leaders would be maybe at 10% or at the bottom, yeah, what we're talking about here, but it's still something that can be improved. Yeah. So it's only a small component of the insurance issue or the land manager confidence or the consumer confidence, but it's still a percentage, and any percentage is a positive in all those areas.
Yeah, and it's also the thing that often gets seen, particularly from a customer point of view, that level of confidence and competence from the guides in the field or the leaders in the field is actually what people remember, rather than whether you've got a perfectly written risk management plan, you know, that they don't even see. But they understand if someone is actually doing a really good job, they can sort of see that more, I guess.
Who would manage this program? Because really, the main thing I see for this to work, and for this to work for insurers and to work for every company, is that everybody has to adopt it. So who's going to manage the overarching to make sure that all these people have everything that they need?
Well, as I said before, it's a bit of a trial that we're running as Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. But the hope is, if it's a success, then it'd be OCA that would potentially take that on at a national level. But yeah, you've got to sort of try and stick your toe in the water to make sure the temperature's right before we sort of jump in wholeheartedly. And as Don can attest to, we don't have the capacity at national level at this point in time to trial anything. So that's why, you know, my board said, well, let's give it a go. Let's see what we can do to start making away with those 5 issues that we see, to see if we can do anything. Maybe, you know, at the end of the day, we're going to turn around and go, that all failed, you know, let's go back to the drawing board. But, you know, if it does start to make some way with some of those objectives, then at least we're heading in the right direction. A conversation at my Connect and Share, which I wasn't at, I empowered my members to do it last Friday before last, and said, right, tell me, you know, what are some of the challenges? And interestingly enough, they didn't know that I was about to launch this or put it out to the market. Yet a conversation came up where they said, wouldn't it be great to have a database of all outdoor leaders? And I went, oh, that's interesting. And literally what this is, as you said, Cherie, you know, that power of getting everyone starts really giving us, and when I say us, I'm really talking about Dom and Mark and myself, where we start understanding really what the sector's made up of today and tomorrow. And that data that we don't have access to now starts becoming a bit of a reality, because, you know, when we went into COVID and we wanted to advocate for the sector, I couldn't put my hands on anything to say that we used to have this many and now we have this many. Or, you know, this is the hit that we've taken due to COVID, because the stats just aren't available for our sector. So, you know, not saying that this is an answer to everything, but certainly if we started to build that database that Simone talked about at the last Connect and Share, it seems to give us a tool that at least I can say, well, I have access to, I don't know, you know, 400 outdoor leaders that I know can inform me of what's happening in their space, or even say there's 400 outdoor leaders that are full-time employees in the sector.
I mean, one thing to point out, like 25 years ago, a small group was discussing, like we are now, codes of practice for the outdoor industry, okay, which turned into the adventure activity standards in Victoria, then around the country, and now what we've got. So our original idea was some sort of code of practice was entirely different to what we ended up with. But I think this discussion here could well take us into something that works for our employees, our leaders, and that. Yeah, we worry about the operators later. So where it takes us, as long as we're moving forward, I think that's the thing. We need to adapt, do something simple for a start, and then see where it takes us. I think it's good that the industry's having the discussion.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the most important part.
I think the other part of that is it's really only going to take off if employers buy into it and actually value the system and say, yeah, I agree. You know, if someone is ranked, I don't know, gold on this system, then yeah, they will be able to do this and this. And you know, if that's the biggest problem that Dale's had, that very few employers bothered with it. So we had a national outdoor leader registration scheme, but no employer put a, or I shouldn't say no, very few employers actually valued it. Therefore, very few employees went, I'm not going to jump through all those hoops if it doesn't do anything for my potential to work in this industry. I don't need it. So, so that's the bit that I think that employers need to see the benefit of it as well as employees. And it's got to cover off both sides of that picture, I think. And that's probably a key piece of all that. I think the other side of it is it's never going to work if it's something that only employers want. Like, I think the employees have to see the benefit of it too. So that's the key piece, because it's, at the end of the day, it's going to be employees jumping through hoops. But if, where's the benefit as far as making sure that it is delivering something that helps with particularly professional development and the ongoing career options?
I mean, I think we've got to aim for something that the leader wants to be a part of. That's probably the critical side of it. I mean, many of the leaders, including myself, are talking about this concept of a union, which is another option. I might add, as an employer, if I thought that whatever happens was going to encourage my leaders to improve their professional development by attending short leadership things, anything that would make them better leaders, I would be paying the bloody $30 for all of them, to be a part of this thing as a part of their employment. I mean, obviously I might think of things differently, but I think many leaders, many organisations, if we could look at them as well, might actually see the benefit in subsidising their leaders in this.
It's a good point.
Would I be able to make some comments? I think it's a fairly diverse sector. A few examples. Last year, I worked as a freelance outdoor leader, if you want to call me that, in 4 different states across 4 different areas of the sector. None of those I was in a category of being a miscellaneous worker or paid in that capacity. So one of them, I was an academic, a sessional teacher at a university. Others I was working for schools, others I was working for not-for-profits, others I was working for for-profit agencies or running outdoor programs. So I think the idea is good, but I think there's also people who are in the sector and have been in the sector for a number of years and have a range of training qualifications. And whilst I agree that not many employers recognize the previous NOLS qualifications, if you wanted to run Duke of Ed programs, for example, in Queensland, it was the only qualification that Duke of Ed Queensland recognized. So it was a requirement for everyone working in Duke of Ed programs in Queensland to have NOLS qualifications. So someone like myself with almost 30 years experience working in the sector had to go through another set of qualifications to get the ability to run Duke of Ed programs. And whilst I think the idea of having an outdoor leaders certification is a good idea, I think we need to be a bit aware of the fact that there are already qualifications in the sector, and I'm not detracting from the idea in any way in that statement, but I'm just saying that I think if the outdoor leaders certification is going to become something that we have, I think it needs to be a national qualification. I think it needs to be recognized by all states. One of the problems I think Australia suffers from now is that in each state, slightly different qualifications are recognized for slightly different things. So that's my comment.
Beautiful, Pete. Thanks. That's certainly the intention. I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of ACA, not. I think John can do that better than I can. But certainly the conversation around NOLS that we had, and John, please jump in. But the way I understood it was exactly what you said, Pete, is that it was only Queensland or WA that really adopted it. So, you know, how do we get something that's learning from the mistakes of Knowles or the lack of ability to progress Knowles, and then look at how we amend that?
I think the way we did the adventure activity standards back when was we decided not to go national. We decided to do, we got funded by Sport and Rec Victoria, and we did our little trial in Victoria. And if it hadn't have worked, we'd lost a little bit of money and a bit of time, but we were small enough we could do it ourselves. It actually worked, and then slowly everyone else picked it up. By doing something, having a test case, whatever we end up with, it might just be a registration of what you do. It might not be any assessment. But if it starts to work and other states and everyone is looking at it, and we tidy it up, at some stage the council may be able to pick it up and say, okay, we've got sort of at least interest from everyone else. Now's the time to go national, which is what happened with the AAS. If we'd have done it earlier, it would have failed. Someone would have said we're not going to play. Whereas at the time, all the states were happy to set up a national system. So I think a trial on one state, everyone watches, maybe interacts, and then it either works or it doesn't. And if it works, I think we would get the support of the other peak bodies. Because what happened in Victoria when the Knowles thing came out, I was the chair of Outdoors Victoria at the time, and I was also on the board of the VOEA, the Outdoor Education Association, and both boards decided we didn't want to play. So the state of Victoria formally said, for whatever reason, we didn't want to play. Now, maybe it didn't get and we had people coming and talking to us and everything about it. And we don't want that. We want to have something small that those types of organisations that I was just mentioning would say, yes, we want to be a part of this, which did happen with the AAS. So I think it's a bit of politics has to be played along the way as well. Can
I ask a question? Because one of the comments on the Facebook page was around someone saying, this doesn't inspire me as an outdoor leader to apply. I can't see what's in it for me. What would be your response to that, or how do we get around that, I suppose?
My next comment was going to be kind of regarding that, because I was thinking as an individual who going into this system, and once again, it kind of goes around how you plan to kind of RPL it or whatever you want to call it. But that would be one of the biggest pullbacks from me is like the fact that, one, are you going to standardize all the information that everybody has to give you? So like a standard logbook, a standard like information. If you do that, then that's a lot of work on my end to reorganize my, or go back in time and try to figure out something that you've asked me to put in there, but I don't have, or so I guess, is there a way to do this without putting so much onus on the individual and just have them provide you with what they have? And this puts a lot of work on somebody else, of course. Then they'll have to go through and look through, everybody's individual thing and basically determine whether they meet a criteria or not. If they don't, go back to them and say, okay, can you prove, this or whatever? And then it'd be a lot of back and forth and somebody putting, or actually several people putting in a lot of time and effort to make that happen.
I think that's certainly doable, Sheree, and I don't see it as an onerous process, because I suppose what the thought process with the small people that helped me put this together is having something that everyone should be doing already. So it's not, you're all doing logbooks, you're all done, relationships with landholders, you all should be encouraging your growth and development of various things. So it's not anything, hopefully, anything we're asking anyone to do more of. And I think that process is relatively easy. I suppose what's interesting for me is the comment around, well, why should I bother even putting it in? Like, sure, I can put it in, but what's going to inspire me to even apply and pay that $30 or $40 to do it? This person said, I don't see the benefit in me having that certification. So I suppose my question is, what would inspire you? What would you want if you were to be certified? What would you expect in return, so that we can potentially workshop that and see what value we can give back?
I think it's a beautiful image to suggest that outdoor leaders are motivated by ideals and passion for working in the outdoors. But most outdoor leaders at the end of the day are motivated by getting qualifications to increase their actually financial reward for doing the job. And I'm not saying we all need to operate that way, but I think at the end of the day, if there's not some sort of incentive moving through the tiers of the certification system to actually increase one's paycheck, then I do know a lot of outdoor leaders who would say, well, why would I actually bother taking the time to go through this process in my already busy life?
Yep. Yeah. And that's very similar to the comment I got, Pete.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point, Pete, as far as, and that goes back to the sustainability of the whole industry, is if we continue to churn all the workers through and burn them out, you know, that's not actually developing the, you know, the structure of our whole industry. But also, if we're not recognising the ongoing development of the staff who are doing it, particularly financially, well, why would they stick around? So it's a real challenge, I think. And I think the big bit that we need to think about in this is also what levels of currency, like rather than talking about the quals, I think it's all really about currency and what's the, how do we maintain skills and increase skills, not necessarily just qualifications, as far as thinking about it that way. So it's an important, there's a little distinction, but that's one that I think is important in this space. It's not, I don't think it should be, oh, you need to keep doing more and more formal qualifications. It's actually about what are you doing to increase your skills in different areas in the outdoors.
I said a starting point might just be, as Cherie, I think, mentioned, yeah, might just be listing what we actually do, yeah, that we work in the field, these are the activities we do. Yeah, we do a percentage volunteer, yeah, I spend, yeah, a fair bit of time, yeah, what do I spend recreating in my adventures, yeah, to keep my skills up. That's one, so yeah, that would give us information. You could have qualifications, but just what people actually lead in is probably, you know, the places that they're working in at the moment, volunteer or otherwise. And I think the things we give people is we need someone to lobby for better paying conditions, which should be a part of this. So it should be starting the lobby for better paying conditions. And the other thing is many leaders, they don't know where to go if they're not sure about what they should be doing. You know, yeah, they might have a question, like a union. You can go to your union, you can say, look, I've got a problem with my employer, or I don't know whether I've got a problem. What am I supposed to do in this case? Yeah. So perhaps a portal where, you know, a leader can go and get answers to, yeah, to worries about various things. Should I have this? Should I have that? Yeah. Someone's asked me to do this. Should I be doing it? Yeah. So providing that service that a union traditionally provides, maybe in a lower level, I think would maybe meet the reason why a leader might become involved.
I'm going to throw an idea out there. I think that someone who has 30 years of experience and 5 different qualifications and is perhaps in our new certification draft operating at platinum level should be paid at a different rate to someone who is couple of years out of the, you know, out of a qualification and is operating at the first tier of the level. Currently in our sector, that is not really happening across the board.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Pete. And I think one of the ones on that is employers will say, well, I only need someone with this level of qual because that's all I actually have to do under the standards. I've got to have my group ratios, I've got to have this covered. And that's actually not putting a value on someone who has reached the platinum level or whatever, you know, and that's a problem. And it's almost like, as an industry, it's almost like we just say, oh, we're just going to treat you all the same. But it doesn't make sense because you're getting the benefit of the many years of experience and in the operations in different environments and in different conditions. And that's a bit that it's really hard to put a real value on it. But yeah, I think it's a really good point you've made.
And if I can add too, part of the challenge there is that in many cases, those leaders with 30 years experience are doing exactly the same job as those 2 years out of college. They're taking a group out into the outdoors, you know, on expeditions, whatever. So, you know, where is the extra value in paying them more money? I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm saying, you know, as an employer, you've got to look at that too. You know, if they were giving back, if they were mentoring new staff or working alongside younger staff, whatever, yeah, maybe. But often that's not the case.
Yeah, the issue comes when the proverbial hits the fan. It tends to be the older, more experienced people who generally, and I'm generalising here, but generally people look to for the way out of the problem. But it's not always that situation, and I guess that's the bit. And like you say, Mark, maybe if it is a formal mentoring situation or even informal, but it needs to have some sort of recognition as far as what the expectations are in that setting, I suppose.
I think the industry across the world faces the same challenge in that there's no permanence. That where do freelance people go to? Where do we build up to? And how do we increase the value chain? So like Pete says, he's been doing it for 30 years, but he's getting paid the same as someone who's been there for 2 years. But Pete, that's the question, is what is the future? It's like most of us on this forum here have all been in it for years. We're either in a management position and we've got people underneath us and we're trying to be spokespeople for them, but we're already in a position where this is our permanent, you know, we've got our own organization, we've got our own, whether it's a national body that we're looking after, we've all risen up, but there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of people below us that see no future in the industry, that it's a temporary thing until we can get other employment, or it's while I'm young and can have fun, then we go and do it. And that is a question I believe that we need to address somehow. And until we can address that question, we have we're going to be going around and around the circle of how do we add value, how do we keep people in the industry, how do we affect changes, how do we affect prices, how do we affect, you know, someone like Pete's been in for 30 years, he's still getting paid the same as someone else. That's a bigger challenge that this industry over the world is facing.
And I think that's one thing that I've noticed is that in the outdoor industry, the higher up the chain you move, then the further away you get from what you enjoy doing. So it kind of those people who decide to stay at that, what they enjoy doing and what they do really well, they're almost being penalized for not being ambitious, I guess, to move up the chain. But the value that they add to those programs is phenomenal. And, you can't get that same quality out of a year one student.
I think I've been in this job for a bit over 5 years, Cherie, and I've probably had that conversation with at least a dozen people complaining about how the boss allegedly is moving them into a managerial role and they can no longer go out and do field stuff. And it's so that the boss can go back to doing field stuff. And like, this is a serious complaint that I've got a lot of times. And you're like, oh, you should see this as an awesome learning experience. But the problem is you don't get to go have the fun stuff with the boss too, because the boss is then joining a little club with the other leaders. And so it's almost like I'm being sidelined from the stuff I really want to do. And I was talking to one person, I said, but surely this is ideal for you. This boss is trusting you with the managerial side of stuff, partly so that they can go out and maintain their field currency. But also the other bit was, I said, well, what if one day you want to actually open your own show? This is ideal. You're learning on their dime. You couldn't ask for more. But was really, and I've had it several times, really quite cranky about the fact that I'm getting moved into the office job. And I was like, oh.
So is part of the challenge that we're facing in this industry is that we are valuing hard skills over soft skills. So Pete has got the hard skills, but he's got 30 years of experience of soft skills, which no one recognizes. And how can we make the soft skills the way that we have learned as people who've been in the industry for years and years, if not decades, in working face to face with people, how can we make those as equally important, or if not more important, than the hard skills? Because if we can make the soft skills the criteria, or let's say we can make the hard skills the foundation, but the soft skills the criteria for ongoing growth, then we have continuity. And we have people who've been in it for years having much more value.
I actually pay people a premium, an extra on top, if they've got high levels of soft skills. Now, that might be a 22-year-old or it might be a 60-year-old, right? But those people that can just manage groups and do amazing things, to me, they're worth more and I pay them more. Might not be a lot, might be sort of $40 a day or something. To me, that's where I get my customers back. So it's value for me as an organisation. In fact, I've told one of my leaders he's got to stop getting nice letters back because the rest of us are embarrassed. Everyone thinks he's amazing. I'm going to have to grow long hair and get a band. He's a bit hippie.
I think then the question is, how do we standardize soft skills?
Exactly. What's the criteria?
That's, I would say, would be part of the problem with that. I have a question that kind of goes along with all this. And one of the things that I've heard many times in the outdoor field is we don't have enough money to pay you more. And essentially that's what I've heard from a lot of different companies. If they paid you more, then they couldn't, then schools wouldn't pay for it or people wouldn't pay for it. What's the thoughts of the people in the room? Because you guys are pretty high up. So it's a good room to ask the question.
It's actually bullshit, in a general sense, okay. I mean, I compete against a number of other operators, right? Okay, some of them charge, most of them charge roughly about what I do. Most of them pay about $200 a day for their leaders. I start at $340 a day for a field leader. I'm still operating after 35 years. Yes, I'm not going to make $1 million, and yes, we need to be charging more for what we do, but we could pay more within the structure of the things we do now. We do need to sort of move our prices up anyway. Anyone that looks at the industry from outside thinks that we undercharge, but it is possible. It's got to be.
I'm happy to respond to that. I won't swear though. I think generically it's about business practice, and I think that the struggle we're going to have, and I can already see it in some of the people that I'm working with, is understanding the choices you make as a business and where your priorities are. And I think as a business consultant in the past, and probably still are to a degree, there's a lot of work we have to do in making sure these businesses are sustainable, long term. Because if you look at them the way they're operating now, I've got to say I worry about where they're going to be in a couple of years' time, some of them. So I think we've got to, as peak bodies, we work with them to educate them on best practice and to value what needs to be valued. And I think that's a big challenge I've got ahead of me, and I'm sure Dob's had a bit more experience in this than myself. But that's a significant conversation.
Yeah, I think just to follow on from that, Lori, I think it goes to, there's sort of three different competing priorities for any business operator: valuing your team, your staff, valuing your customers, but also valuing your, I guess your stakeholders, as in your shareholders or the owners of the business. And they're the three competing things in any business that we have in the world, as far as, within reason. And that's one of those things of, how do you make sure your team is actually fairly compensated for it, and at the end of the day, you're achieving the strategic goals of your organisation, whether that's making $1 million like Dave Chitty has for 30 years, as he just said, or whether it's covering your costs and keeping the things ticking over. That's the bit that I think every business operator is running, that three-way balancing priorities, and it's really difficult. But I'm not sure all of them out there, and I've certainly again had conversations, I'm not sure everyone thinks about it, of how do you balance all three of them, and that it's hard. And at the same time, you've got everything else, all the other responsibilities that come with operating any organisation. So you've got your environmental footprint and you know every other part of what you do.
But what I do makes good business sense. I'm paying casual, so you know my $340 a day is that includes a 25% loading, right? Yeah, that's fine. But I don't have to go and chase instructors. Okay. If I have a big job or a little job, I've got the leaders there. They're casuals, part-timers. They will come and work for me. I keep people between 6 to 10 years. Is probably the average would be 10, maybe more. But I'm not sort of putting out on Facebook, I need an instructor for abseiling for Friday and all this sort of stuff, and I haven't got time to check you. So from a business point of view, although I pay more and I think I look after my people, because I keep them, it actually saves me money. So I'm spending money actually to run my business more effectively. And I think my bottom line probably reflects that. While I don't make a huge profit, none of us do, I'm not losing money by paying more and providing gear and doing the right thing by people.
Well,
Is part of the challenge. Sorry, should we go?
I was just going to say, tell more people about that.
It is part of the challenge that by nature, the industry we're in is a high volume, low profit and highly competitive. So when it comes to pricing, we, instead of trying to say, how can we add value and therefore increase our prices, we have a different model and we say, how can we decrease our prices to attract more business? And what ends up happening is we shoot each other in the foot in the long term.
Yeah, it's a race to the bottom and no one wins.
Yeah,
that's one of the problems. The other way is a race to the top where everyone wins because everyone's delivering quality products at a reasonable price that people can see the value of. And every time someone undercuts their competitor, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And it's hard not to do it, but that's the trouble.
Alan, I've come from the tourism sector where that is a huge problem. And they've worked it out, but it's been a long battle to really switch that. And I think the interesting part about where we are right now as a sector is the opportunity is so now because of the demand as people have come out of COVID and their four walls, they're ready to get outside. And if we don't make a change now, we're missing a great opportunity to try to make that change.
Yeah.
Agreed. And this is my argument in South Africa is that we've got COVID and we are now running at 50% capacity by law, not by we're running at 10% capacity of what we were actually, but by law we're only allowed to have 50% capacity on our venues, plus our expenses for sanitizers and different programs and safety has gone through the roof. And yet people are saying, let's cut prices to attract more business. And I've been saying, no, actually, this is the time you see, Lori, we need to be increasing the prices. So people say we're not being substandard in any way, and we are adding more value. And people are seeing us as important. And I wrote this a month ago, and I said, as value increases, so the importance of what we do grows. As the importance of what we do grows, so does demand. As demand grows, so does the financial viability of the industry. And as the financial viability of the industry grows, so does the long-term sustainability. And as sustainability grows, so does the impact we do. Yet we're flipping it around. And as we flip it around, we're actually putting ourselves out of business.
Yeah.
Need to know this.
Sorry, guys. I'm just going to have to end the recorded part of the session. This has been a really awesome conversation that we've had. It's been really engaging. So hopefully we'll get people watching it on Facebook and they can enjoy everything that we've talked about today. I think Lori posted that there's going to be another opportunity to talk more about it. When is that?
Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
There we go. Thursday at 9:30. I'll end with our quote of the week, which is leadership is unlocking people's potential to become better, which is, I think, what we've been talking about today. And the video I have there is a about outdoor education and the value of transference, which I think is another really powerful topic of this discussion. Thanks for everybody joining, and we will hopefully see you next week when we will be doing a holiday party. So wear your best holiday gear and bring some eggnog, and we'll see you guys there. All right, you guys can continue. Oh, you've already got